Hello. It's a pleasure to see you. How are you?
I needed to start.
You're doing well. I'm thinking. I know that. You're going to hand off to Sherry Bryant.
Sherry?
Sherry Bryant.
So this is in here? Oh yeah, it is right there. Okay. She just came up to me.
I do have mine. I do have mine. If you want.
Where did you come in from? Just landed today or yesterday?
I know.
Good for you. Getting some time here. Yeah, is it your first time here? Congratulations. Hope you get a
Good afternoon. I'm Howard Walpe. I'm Director of the Project on Leadership and Building State Capacity. And I'm delighted to welcome all of you to the Wilson Center. Just by way of a very brief introduction about the center itself, for those of you who may be new to the center, the center was established by an act of Congress back in 1968 as the living memorial to President Woodrow Wilson. Incidentally, this is not my normal speaking voice. I hope I can get through these remarks. I'm sorry. And it was established as a living memorial to the only president in American history that happened to have a PhD and was university president and professor. And so the center was established as a way of recognizing his commitment to bringing together the world of ideas with the world of public policy. We are a neutral, nonpartisan institution that's devoted to research and scholarship, debate and reflection on every conceivable global and national issue. Today's event, which we are very pleased to co-sponsor with the National Democratic Institute, and which is entitled Youth in Politics in Conflict Contexts, is designed to explore the ways in which youth serve as important catalysts for positive change and as contributors to sustainable peace through active involvement in the political process. This event links directly to the work of the Leadership Project here at the Center that seeks to address the missing process and leadership dimension of peace building and post-conflict reconstruction. On a technical level, the art of building democratic state capacity is well understood, but the harder political task, helping the leaders of warring factions achieve their objectives, to work collaboratively in avoiding war or supporting post-war reconstruction, and to build democratically accountable links between the governors and the governed, requires a careful examination of what we believe to be underappreciated leadership factor in peace building and post-conflict reconstruction. Too often, the notion of leadership is narrowly defined to be inclusive of only the older, educated elite population of these divided societies. And youth, who are often considered to be part of the problem, are ignored. Today's event seeks to expand the notion of leadership to incorporate youth leaders and to understand the leadership roles these youth hold in their communities and among their constituencies. We are delighted to have joining us today youth leaders from Bosnia, from Kenya, from Liberia, and from New York. Our first panel this afternoon will focus on the role of youth in building and strengthening democratic institutions, and will be moderated by Elizabeth Kovich. I always butcher your last name, Elizabeth.
I think they knew who I am.
I'm not even going to try to say it.
All right, Howard.
I'm so sorry. Who is the director of the USA's Office of Conflict Management and Mitigation, and a career Foreign Service officer with tours in Afghanistan, in Russia, and Honduras. Elizabeth has spent significant time in the Caucasus, Nepal, Philippines, Bosnia, Rwanda, Burundi, Ethiopia, and Eritrea, working primarily on humanitarian and conflict-related programs. Before her current capacity, she served for 3 years as the director of the Disaster Response and Mitigation Division of the Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance, and for 1 year in the Office of Transition Initiatives. Following a 15-minute break, the second panel will focus on youth involvement in Liberia, and will be moderated by Bill Milam. I don't know if this Bill is in the room yet. He is a senior policy scholar here at the Wilson Center. former U.S. Chief of Mission in Liberia. He's also had other ambassadorial posts around the world. In Liberia, he served from 1995 to 1998. Bill retired from the Foreign Service in July of 2001 and then was recalled after September 11th to spend 9 months engineering the reconstruction of Afghanistan. He's had extensive experience in a variety of posts, serving as ambassador to Bangladesh, as chief of mission, as I said, in Liberia, and later as ambassador to Pakistan. He's also held a variety of economic posts and has served as the U.S. representative to the Paris Club on issues of restructuring of foreign debt. At this point, I'd like to turn the podium over to Sherry Bryan, Senior Associate and Director of the Southern and East Africa Programs at NDI. Those who are leading the program today are aware of this, but I am on my way to the Congo. I leave in just a couple of hours, so I shall be departing instantly, unfortunately. But I wish you all wish that you will all have a very successful conference. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Howard.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here today and exciting to see such a full room filled with young people and some of us who are not so young anymore. But I think this is going to be a very interesting conversation. I just came from a lunch with the new president of Liberia and had an opportunity to mention this seminar today, and she was quite excited about that, and I think very committed to dealing with the issues that youth face in Liberia, high unemployment, and a history of violence and conflict in that country. So she thought this was an interesting initiative. In 1966, Senator Robert Kennedy was invited to South Africa. I didn't know this until we started putting together these remarks. He was invited by the Anti-Apartheid National Union of South African Students, and he spoke at the University of Cape Town. He also spoke in Soweto. And he gave a speech, what has since become to know as the Day of Affirmation speech. And in part of it, he spoke about youth and the role of youth. And he said, "Our answer is the world's hope. It is to rely on youth. It cannot be moved by those who cling to a present which is already dying, who prefer the illusion of security to the excitement of danger. It demands the qualities of youth, not a time of life, but a state of mind, a temper of the will, a quality of imagination, and a predominance of courage." I think he was a person that was extremely optimistic about the role of youth, both in American society and outside the United States. But today we find that a lot of citizens and governments and representatives of the international community often deal or view young people as part of the problem and not part of the solution, particularly in countries that are emerging or on the verge of conflict. At NDI, we believe, and maybe I should say a few words about NDI, the National Democratic Institute for International Affairs. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization working in 60 countries around the world to encourage and engage people in the political process through political parties, legislatures, elections, and civil society. But I think across our organization and every office we have, there's a real commitment to engaging youth, and we believe that youth can serve as catalysts for change and can play an important role in the promotion, resolution, and prevention of conflict if they're constructively engaged. The panelists that are going to be speaking today know from their own experience that young people desire and deserve to be involved in the political process. Coming from Bosnia, Kenya, and Liberia, they're to be commended for their courage and fortitude and for taking leadership roles in their countries when they're most needed. I hope this gathering leads to a greater understanding of how we can all encourage and support these young activists and other young people like them to be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. In many conflict and post-conflict societies, and I would say pre-conflict societies, youth are often marginalized and have a very small voice in the process. And I think that in large part contributes to their frustration. Too often, government and elected officials don't engage young citizens or encourage them to participate in politics. And when young people do try to express their political wishes, government officials often overlook their specific concerns, like access to education and particularly employment in most of the developing world. The isolation of youth and the perception that their issues go largely ignored, I think, is what leads to frustration and tragically can lead to violence and conflict. We've seen in many places, including the countries that are represented by the panelists today, and many others, that when youth are provided the right kind of skills and training and encouragement, they can effectively and constructively engage and be agents for positive change. They can become to view themselves as partners in the process and become stakeholders with a vested interest in a sustained peace or a peaceful transition. And I think young people have a lot to contribute just by their very nature. They have a lot more energy, they're eager, they have new ideas, cutting edge ideas, they know how to use technology, and oftentimes they're willing to take risks that some of us who are older don't. In the last 20 years, NDI has worked in 18 post-conflict countries, almost every country that's emerged from a civil war. We've gone in afterwards and worked to help create a new political system, rebuild political parties, help create new constitutions and electoral laws and frameworks that allow people to participate equitably. I think our challenge now is in the host of countries that are on the verge of conflict. And because of ethnic divisions, religious differences, and the ever-growing disparity between rich and poor, and those who have nothing and no jobs. Places like Nigeria, Pakistan, and Nepal are just a few that I think of where we really want to attempt to mitigate conflict. And I think one of the keys is to engage youth in those types of countries to help them be part of the solution. NDI is not alone in this view. The Woodrow Wilson Center, the National Endowment for Democracy, and the USAID's Office of Conflict Mitigation and Management, or Management and Mitigation, also share this view and are supporting the efforts of young people to be active and engaged. But there has been limited discussion on this topic, and the development community really doesn't have the tools or the ideas about how to approach youth. I think this conference is a good first step in figuring out how we can do this more effectively. The seminar is part of a larger effort that we have at NDI, which is going to be developing case studies around the projects that the panelists are going to be talking about. And we also hope to develop a toolkit that can be shared with the broader community to look at real concrete methods of engaging youth. So on behalf of NDI, thank you all for coming here. I think just the fact that the room is crowded shows that there's a lot of people interested in this topic. And I'll turn it over to you, and I'm not even going to attempt to say your last name.
I'll reintroduce myself.
Thank you, and good luck.
Good afternoon. Let me reintroduce myself very briefly. My name is Elizabeth Kvitashvili. To those in aid, they usually refer to me as Elizabeth K. And for those people who've known me a lot longer, they've resulted and they've called me EK. It gets that bad. So no problem with my name. It is always a pleasure to participate in events that are sponsored by Woodrow Wilson Center. And I wanted to congratulate Howard for organizing yet another timely and insightful venue to share ideas on a topic of relevance to all of us. I also want to share those same kudos with our colleagues at NDI, which has been at the forefront of undertaking research and programming involving youth and their ability to engage positively in dealing with issues facing their country. So it is a pleasure to be here today. Although post-conflict reconstruction has dominated the headlines lately, as I'm sure many of you are aware, conflict-sensitive programming has been a priority for USAID in recent years. While USAID is committed to responding effectively to violence and its aftermath, we can, indeed we must, do a more effective job of trying to address the issues that we know lead to widespread violence, pervasive instability, and unfortunately extremism. When young people, particularly young men, are uprooted, alienated, unemployed, and have few opportunities for positive engagement, they represent a ready pool of recruits for extremist groups or those that have violent agendas. Several categories of young people appear to be particularly at risk, including unemployed university graduates, young people who have moved from rural to urban areas, and young people who have lived through internal conflicts. USAID has been shifting attention to at-risk youth and is currently funding a broad range of training, employment, and political participation programs around the globe, and in particular in countries that have been identified as at risk of instability. Another reason that young people participate in violence is, as you know, there are often few avenues for constructive political participation, and NDI's role in helping to engage people in positive political consultations is very important in this regard. As an example of some of the new thinking in AID, we have the current situation in Nepal. Here, youth is not surprisingly of increasing concern, as we, and no doubt many others, have discovered that while youth are happy to be involved in the many activities funded by our NGO partners, their number one priority remains employment. As they put it to us, quote, "If you give us something to do, we won't have any need to disrupt life," unquote. Youth constitute Nepal's future, but they are also potential spoilers to the Nepali peace process, if not included in that process, and if they do not see concrete results. Therefore, I'm particularly pleased today to moderate a panel that will challenge us to think about how youth can be positive political actors in a world where, as noted by Population Action International in a 2003 report entitled The Security Demographic, noted, quote, "The youth bulge is positively correlated to political volatility. And in countries where more than 40% of the adult population is aged 15 to 29, they are more than twice as likely to experience the outbreak of civil conflict, particularly since the 1990s, unquote." Therefore, I'm very pleased that we have a panel that's going to talk about positives today rather than negatives, and each panelist will be given about 15 minutes to present before we turn the room over to Q's and A's. Let me briefly introduce them. We have three outstanding panelists. We have John Umote, who is an executive director of the Forward People Party, which is the third largest parliamentary party in Kenya. We have Indira Karovich. I'm particularly pleased to see a young woman here, who is a member of the parliament in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and is also a member of the Commission for Information and the Board for Harmonization and Standardization of Texts on Bosnian, Croatian, and Serbian languages. And we have Benjamin Quito, who is the founder and executive director of the Global Youth Action Network, which today links thousands of youth organizations in over 180 countries worldwide in support of social change. His work over the past 10 years includes advocating for youth participation within the United Nations. Please join me in welcoming our panel.
Thank you, Madam Elizabeth. Good afternoon. It's my pleasure, an honor to stand before you today to make a few remarks on the participation of young people in the political process, and drawing mainly from my own experiences in Kenya, together with what we went through in the Young Leadership Academy, which was sponsored by the National Democratic Institute way back in 2002. In my country, the definition of a youth has kept changing from time to time, with sometimes preposterous definitions being made. in order to serve certain political interests. During the Kanu regime, for example, a youth could even be a person of over 50 years. The most recent and acceptable definition by the current government, though, is that a youth is a person in the precinct of childhood to 35 years of age. But we're looking to a situation where it will be reduced perhaps to less than 30. After the independence, youth took over power in my country from the colonialists. They were in no hurry to leave the political scene and have therefore succeeded themselves up to even 3 times to the detriment of those coming behind them. Serving as Kenya's third president at about 75 years of age, President Kibaki was the executive officer of KANU at 31 years of age. The political environment in Kenya has therefore been least conducive to youthful participation. The youth have had to face many challenges in their bid to find relevance in the country's politics. The slow pace of the evolution of the democratic culture over the years has been a major challenge to the participation of the youth in the political process. Through the repeal of Section 2A of the Constitution, the country embraced multi-party democracy again in 1991. But it was not until 2002 that the meaning of this concept began to be felt. All this time, we were a multi-party state in law, but a single-party state in practice. The political environment was stifling for anyone who played outside government, and where the situation was bad for everyone, then it could only have been a nightmare for anyone below 35 years of age. The only time the youth participated in the political activities of the time was when they were in the employ of KANU in an amorphous outfit known then as KANU Youth Wingers, which was a euphemism for stone throwers, hecklers, informal security, and everything negative. It was nearly impossible for the youth to be positively engaged by way of contributing ideas and alternative visions or different points of view on any matter. We therefore have quite a number of situations, issues that stand in the way of positive participation of the youth in the political process. One of these, of course, which stands out is the question of resources, where, of course, the youth are disadvantaged largely. And most of the time, for those perhaps who would be bold enough to want to go for elective office, you find yourself disadvantaged because you don't even have resources to mount a campaign. Or, in some cases, young people that you expect to be the pillars of your campaign run away from you because you're young and you don't have money to support them. Then they go to the side of your competitor. I remember back in 2002 when I first threw my hat into the ring as an aspirant for a parliamentary seat in the general election. I had developed a manifesto, and I did this soon after the end of the first session of the Youth Academy by the NDI, which manifesto had captured the issues of development, complete with proposals on how I would deal with specific developmental issues in my constituency. A nomination certificate had to be given to either me or my fairly aged and moneyed competitor. It went to him on the basis of age and money. I protested, saying that I had an agenda while he did not have one. But because, of course, that time of my limited political experience, I got hurt. And I got hurt even more because no one really wanted to pay attention to the fact that I had an agenda. They didn't even want to discuss it. So it was just cast to the side. I did not give up, thanks to the NDI Youth Academy that taught me that, among other personalities, Abraham Lincoln did not become the great American president that he turned out to be on his first attempt to run for political office.
Excuse me, could I ask everybody to confirm that their cell phones are indeed off? Some of this noise is due to some cell phones that remain on. Thank you. Excuse me.
Thank you. The other factor that often impedes the effective involvement of youth in political leadership is ignorance. You'll find that whereas one may be keen on making issues the center of a campaign, the levels of understanding of a people become a big stumbling block. It's not once in the course of my campaigning that I've had to think on my feet in order to wriggle out of a messy situation where the very youth that constitute the critical constituency that you deem vulnerable, therefore which direly needs emancipation in terms of ideas and worldview, and which should be at the forefront in defending what is right, will be fighting you instead. The lack of a proper and institutional framework for the operation of political parties as co-agents of the democratization process is a major challenge in Kenya. Without a properly defined and predictable modus operandi on issues such as internal party elections and processes, party nominations, etc., one can only expect chaos at election time, therefore leading to a situation where the less connected, and in this case the youth, get perennially marginalized in the political process. At the party level, it's never easy for young people. One is often viewed as a suspect of inadequacy until he or she proves otherwise. So besides having to grapple with the usual challenges that political leadership brings along, a young person has extra baggage that must be shed off at every turn. Unfortunately, not all of this suspicion is unfounded. Some young people that have been trusted with positions of leadership have not helped build a positive image of the youth. Youthful age alone, therefore, cannot be the quintessential measure of good leadership. In spite of the many challenges, few opportunities exist for young people. The opened-up democratic space in my country is a boon for young people. The political environment has become fairly friendly, with government making bold moves to deliberately empower the youth. Political parties, on their part, have moved away from mere rhetoric to actually paving way for the youth. The Ford People Party that I serve as executive director is friendly to youth, I could say. Out of a national executive committee of about 30, 7 are below the age of 35, and they are recent inclusions. The Leadership Academy that I went through back in 2002 drew participants from different political parties, and it was at a time when things were a bit difficult. It was not easy to bring people or young people together in the kind of circumstances that we had in Kenya at that time. When 40 young people from different political parties assembled for the first session of the training, we came face to face with the ugly realities that characterize youth involvement in the political process in Kenya. The venue of day one of the training was virtually turned into a war zone. To begin with, all of us were openly suspicious of one another. We were very skeptical that we would last even a single day together. We exhibited high levels of intolerance that were prepared to get physical at the slightest provocation. We talked at each other rather than with one another. There was such palpable tension and suspicion among the youth because back then it was unthinkable for the youth of KANU to meet those from other political parties. Levels of conflict were so high that physical fights were a common feature whenever these youth met in the political field. It was therefore under this very volatile atmosphere that we came together. The first day's proceedings, of course, were characterized by savage verbal exchanges, with some participants preferring to get on top of tables to literally, in the literal sense, so as to talk down at their perceived opponents from a vantage position. An observant of the events of day one will be forgiven for being skeptical when told that notes and phone numbers were exchanged by the participants at the end of the first session of the academy. What came out during and after the training session was the fact that as young people in the political process, we face many problems, some of which are self-inflicted, whereas some are as a result of ignorance. Sometimes we proceed very blindly regarding pertinent issues to our detriment. The NDI training made us see that we are prone to basing our actions on hugely wrong assumptions, being impatient and intolerant to opposing views, not being tactful in calculating, paying too much attention to issues to do with the smaller picture, being non-strategic or taking the whole leadership question for granted, and assuming that it is a walk-in, takeover situation as opposed to taking time and deliberate steps to build individual and collective capacities in preparation for the challenges of leadership, because they are always there. As I stand before you today, I would say that I owe my position of executive director of the Ford People Party largely to the training I went through back then. The knowledge and the qualities of responsible leadership that I acquired laid a firm foundation for me, since it was easy to wade through the labyrinth of leadership that I faced then on. In fact, it was the concept of volunteerism which I picked from the academy that got me to where I am today. I worked as a volunteer for my party for over 3 years. In addition, my party today has a very good strategic plan in place. I'm happy to have been at the center of its development. We are now in the process of developing and reviewing other party policy documents, such as the party constitution, manifesto, nomination rules, and code of conduct and cooperation position paper. The biggest disadvantage I face, though, is that I have to single-handedly ensure that all this work is done. And so It's all a challenge through and through. The Leadership Academy left behind numerous lessons that one can always draw from. First lesson is that leadership can be taught. Over time, we've come to appreciate that leadership qualities can be acquired through learning and consistent application. We have also learned that the picture about something is never complete until you have heard the other side of the story to it. We are better people today because we now know that there is strength in unity, especially where you're threatened as a constituency. There are a couple of things that I could recommend which may assist in future activity aimed at improving the participation of the youth in political leadership. One of these is the emphasis that must be laid on knowledge on leadership concepts often taken for granted. Oftentimes, politicians, not just in Kenya but in the larger Africa, assume once they've been elected to office, then they become experts on development and management issues. They quickly turn into masters of communication and people skills, forgetting that they're expected to play a bigger part in being agents of inspiration. Youth for youth role models is a concept that should be embraced since it's usually easier to point out a success story and ask one to emulate it. My visit to Washington has caused me to meet Indra, an elected member of parliament from Bosnia. I would assume she's younger than I. And so because I'm an aspirant myself, I get inspired because back home, it's a little complicated. You not believe that I am under pressure, as it is, to step aside for a cousin brother of mine because he's older and has more money than I do. And yes, your guess is as good as mine. I will do no such thing. Thanks to NDI, again, I have this courage. Like I did in 2002, I am challenging anyone to bring forth their development agenda so that the decision on who will be voted for or not is based on the ideas and programs one has. 2 months ago, NDI invited me to speak to the participants of the 6th Youth Academy in Kenya. On speaking to them, I did not know that what I considered routine for me was a valuable lesson on leadership for my audience. They were very happy to have been spoken to by a youth that has faced many challenges but who also seems to be making it. Finally, it's my humble recommendation that all institutions and agencies involved in opening up space for the participation of youth in political leadership should use every available opportunity to push for the institutionalization of political parties because it will be easier for hardworking, determined, committed, and focused youth to find their way in predictable legal and constitutional frameworks as opposed to non-existent or uncertain ones. The wonderful NDI team in Kenya, led by Beata Tora, is doing a commendable job in this regard and needs to be supported even more so so that this goal can be achieved. On the whole, the program we went through back in Kenya by the NDI and other organizations put us on a very good footing. Thank you.
Good afternoon. As you already heard, my name is Indira Karovic, and I'm coming from Bosnia and Herzegovina. On the very beginning, I would like to express my gratefulness for invitation, being here among you, and on my personal name and on behalf of my two wonderful colleagues, I had the opportunity to meet here. Let me first say a few things about Bosnia, the background I'm coming from, because maybe picture of my country will be more clear to you if you heard few basic things about Bosnia. Bosnia and Herzegovina is a country in the southeast part of Europe, situated in the west of the Balkan Peninsula. In the north, it borders with Croatia, in the east with Serbia and Montenegro, and in a coastal area with Republic of Italy. The capital is Sarajevo. Population 4,001,030. In cities, 45%. The density of population is 85.2. Nationalities: Bosniaks 43.7%, Croatians 17.3%, Serbs 31%, and others 7.6%. Official languages are, as you already heard, because I work with body of parliament for standardization of 3 different languages, although they are all the same, but they are called Bosnian, Croatian, and Serbian. Religion: Muslim 48%, Orthodox 33%, and Catholic 16%. Portion of population according to the age would be from 0 to 14, 23% from 15 to 59, 65%, more than 60, 11%. Average life expectancy would be men 69 and women 74. That makes us long-lived and attractive, which is the reason I invite you to visit us and see for yourself the credibility of what has just been said. 1,000-year-old statehood from the medieval Bosnia up until the statehood within the countries of the ex-Yugoslavia resulted by the official international acknowledgement of the sovereign and independent country Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina on 6th of April 1992. After that period, Bosnia and Herzegovina had been internationally acknowledged. The surrounding neighboring countries, the remains of the Yugoslavia and the regime of Franjo Tudjman, the president of Republic of Croatia, carried out armed aggression against it. In the 3.5-year-long war, after being initially indolent, only observing the armed conflict in the BH, and after many not so successful attempts of making peace agreements with the help of USA in a Dayton, State Ohio General Frame Agreement for Peace in BH was signed in the end of 1995. The fact that the agreeing sides, among others, were President of BH, President of in that period Yugoslavia, which includes Serbia and Montenegro, and the Republic of Croatia, goes in favor of my introductory thesis that the above-mentioned countries carried out the armed aggression against the serene and internationally acknowledged country BH. BH is a shortcut for Bosnia and Herzegovina, so it's easier to say. Ethnic cleansing and mass destruction followed mass war crimes that had been systematically carried out by paramilitary formations of the Army of Republika Srpska and regime from Belgrade, Yugoslavia, against the civilian citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina who were Muslims or Catholics. That resulted with insecure, unstable ambient for living in the post-war period. The verdict of the International Court in The Hague confirmed that Yugoslavia, under the presidency of the war criminal Milosevic, broke the Convention about Prevention of the Genocide, thereafter carrying out criminal offense of genocide against Bosnian Muslims. Today, Bosnia and Herzegovina is a state that has the unique political system not known in the history of political systems anywhere in the world. Many home and foreign politicians, though some on purpose and some out of ignorance, say that Bosnia and Herzegovina comprises of the 2 entities and 1 district, when actually it's only the continuation of Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina from 1992. It's not a country made of some independent federal units. The complexity of the constitutional regulation in Bosnia and Herzegovina, enormous administrative apparatus that takes 60 to 65% of gross national product, when European average is between 17 and 25, burdens additionally already complex political, economical, and social situation in the state. Bearing in the mind the remarks I have just stated, it's not difficult to assume that in what condition the young people are. One must add that the educational system is, though only slightly altered, inherited from the time of socialism. What makes the situation even harder are the destructive forces from the part of BH with the majority of Serb population who obstruct the adoption of the educational law according to the European standards because they want to retain political and under control over education. Consequently, it is no wonder that more than 70% of young people want to leave Bosnia and Herzegovina. Only 3% of citizens of BH, 7 of Croatia, and 15 of European Union have university diploma. At the same time, the state has funds for neither science nor capital investment for trained personnel who can carry out the long-expected process of European integration. However, young people make approximately 23% of population of country, and hypothetically they could have a significant role in elections. Nevertheless, deep division based on nationality, religion, ethnicity, and entity generated by discriminatory electoral law, with the complexity of the state apparatus and lack of the state care for youth, create apathy and reluctance for participation in a political life. For example, only 1% of young people in Bosnia and Herzegovina think that they have influence on the political events in the country, and a small number of them is involved in a new rising generation of political parties, whereas somewhat higher number prefers membership in and work in non-governmental sector. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, the role of international community headed by institution of the High Representative is still dominant, and I would say thanks God. His mandate assumes that he can remove from office anyone who violates provision of the General Frame Agreement for Peace in Bosnia and Herzegovina and does other activities of similar nature. Presence of other international organizations in Bosnia and Herzegovina is more than needed in the process of democratization and strengthening the role of young people in transitional period, especially in a part of integration of young people in the social political life. Office of National Democratic Institute that is placed in Sarajevo has a irreplaceable role in the animation of young people and support for their inclusion in the politics through the program of traineeship in the parliaments of BH on 3 different levels. State level as the highest, and then levels of the 2 units, Federation of Bosnia and Republika Srpska. So it means 3 different parliaments. That program is the unique opportunity for young, successful people to gain theoretical and practical knowledge and skills in the area of politics and parliamentary procedures. NDI is a significant subject of promotion and protection of the role and position of youth. It enables, with its program plan activities, active operation in the strengthening of their abilities, significant influence and contribution in the field of education, as well as in development and nourishment of social values, and development of the integrity of their own individuality. Former experiences of young people who went through the program needed to be expanded additionally, and a larger number of young people should take part in it. NDI in this surrounding appears as a true carrier of anti-discriminatory politics, supporting process of integration, enabling equal action of the marginalized individuals and groups in the society, having in mind before everything the population of youth. Personally, I think that my involvement in NDI program of traineeship has encouraged my intentions to nominate in the last general elections and win mandate in Federal Parliament of Bosnia and Herzegovina, that is the highest legislative body of one entity. My role in the parliament now is focused more, because I'm still new one. I have been elected on the last election, and they have been in last year, October, and it took us, let's say, our medias would say 5 months to finally to form all bodies, and to sit and to start with the work. So my role, as I said, my role in Parliament is focused on teamwork inside of the club of representatives of party I'm coming from, and that's Party for Bosnia and Herzegovina. Party for Bosnia and Herzegovina is the party of center, and it pleads for civil and demographic state, BH, in which all democratic state, BH, in which all the citizens are equal, regardless of nationality, religion, sex, or sexual orientation. Its program orientation is based on the ideas of freedom, equality, and respect of human rights and acceptance of principles that are foundation of political culture of contemporary civil democracy. My party recognizes significant and part of young people as progressive forces in the structure of Bosnia and Herzegovina and societies. With its program opens and inclinations, the party enables the enrollment and active operation in public, political, and social life for the young people, aiming to preserve and ensure for them as well as for the other generation a healthy environment in Bosnia and Herzegovina and region. Generations of young people should envision the development of this country, carrying her in their mind and heart for years. They must not and will not be burdened by a mortgage of immaturity and delusion of their predecessors, because the youth cannot live in the past. Their media are the present and the future. Therefore, the steering wheel of the country must come in the hands of progressive youth. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Benjamin Quinto. Thank you for having me here. I just was realizing as I was listening to the previous speakers that I believe I also come from a country in conflict now. Should I do an introduction?
What country?
I'm from the United States. I just wanted to write off of a couple of comments that were said before. Sherry had mentioned not being so young, and I see a bunch of older faces here, which is great. But a friend of mine once gave me a new definition for youth, which is going to work very soon for me, which is that when you're young, you're defined by how much potential you have. And when you're older, you're defined by how much experience you have. So as long as your potential outweighs your experience, then you remain young. I'm dealing with this issue because I just turned 29 about a week and a half ago, and I've been defining youth as under 30 for the past 11 years. In fact, it's been funny because in many countries you are considered a youth up until you're 40. 50 was a new high for me. But in Bangladesh, for example, you're absolutely considered a youth in many parts until you're 40. And the first youth delegate to the General Assembly for Bangladesh was in fact 42, and we had helped to sponsor his participation there. But I had always said that, at least for us as a youth-led organization, I started the Global Youth Action Network, that the youth-led component was really critical to the work, not in just what is being talked about here, but also in the NGO sector at large. Young people need to have a role at the helm. And so I always said that I couldn't still be 30 and still running the organization. So I'm actually now in the